then. Since he's new, we let him say it. Do we have any guests of Rotarians in the room? Got a guest? Carl got a guest?
Thank you, President Martin. I'd like to, would you please stand up? This is Amber Clausen. You may remember her. She was the one that gave the program in Catawba County Historical Association. She's the director of that association, and as such, she directs the Museum of History, the Harper House, Bunker Hill Bridge, and Murray's Mill, and the Pottery Festival, which explains why Alan is sitting there. So, just welcome her to the club, please. Thank you.
Welcome back, Amber. Do we have any other guests of Rotarians in the room? All right. Do we have any announcements today?
We do. President.
Oh, there we go. Susan?
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. Oh, that's right, it's not your money. Just wanted to let you know that you might remember 4 or 5 months ago, we had a speaker, Susie Fender, who was a post-polio syndrome survivor, and she talked about the post-polio syndrome support group that she was a part of. And after that, I talked to President Mark and asked him, you know, might that be something that we would do, because in the Polio Plus Committee, we don't have a whole lot to do since polio is eradicated in the United States. What about trying to start a post-polio syndrome support group here? And so it's taken a couple of months to find the people in this area, but we do have 7 or 8 post-polio syndrome survivors and some of their caregivers. And Susie's going to come on Tuesday, June the 14th at 11:30 a.m. at Golden Corral. Also, Jimmy Rogers, I believe he's from the district with Polio Plus, and maybe O'Neill Shelton. But if any of you are interested and want to join us for lunch that day, it's going to be sponsored by the club for the first meeting of those who come. And also that day, there was one Rotarian, and he might have been a visiting Rotarian, but he came up to the front and told Susie, he said, my wife is a post-polio syndrome survivor, and I have not been able to find out who that person was, but I heard him say it. So if you know who that was, please let me know. But we're really excited about it. The Hickory Rotary Club is on the move with post-polio syndrome support. Thank you.
Sounds like a great group. Thank you for heading that up. And that's Rotary related. I don't think you actually owe $1 for that. Put it in, too late. Does anybody else have any other announcements? No other announcements? Well, I've got some announcements. Wanted to give an update. We've got an email from John LaFontaine. Unfortunately, it's kind of a mixed bag. I'm just going to read you what his email says here. Thank you for writing, and thank you for keeping us in your thoughts and prayers. Things have been a little tougher than usual since you reached out a couple of weeks ago. A little before this note, we discovered that Emily's leukemia had relapsed after the bone marrow transplant with her brother. The cancer was down to 1.2% right before the transplant, and at the beginning of May, we discovered it had returned to 17%. Since then, we drove to Houston, Texas to get a second opinion from MD Anderson. They suggested that we continue on the course of treatment Charlotte offered for the interim, and after checking again in a few weeks, if the cancer was not improved, to transfer to their facility. Last Sunday night, Emily developed a fever. Since her immune system is so compromised, the doctors asked us to head to the emergency room in Charlotte about 10:30 at night. From that point, Emily has been put on antibiotics, and we have been in the hospital since then. It looks like either one of 3 things is causing the fever: an infection, a fever just from having a low blood count can cause that, or leukemia. They took another bone marrow biopsy yesterday to see if the cancer, which we are praying it is not, since that would mean it's gotten worse. We won't know those results until later in the week. In the long term, if we can get Emily's leukemia back in remission, we're going to do another bone marrow transplant, probably in Durham. They appreciate our support and prayers, and he thinks of us often in Rotary. So that's unfortunate, but please be thinking about them. Unfortunately, another unfortunate, which I think we all saw coming, but I got a resignation letter from Neil here. And I want to read this to you. And at the end, I don't think I'll do it justice, but I'll try. It is with great regret that I'm submitting my resignation from the Thursday Rotary Club of Hickory. As you know, due to my stroke and the need for a more comprehensive therapy, I have moved to a retirement community in Winston-Salem. I've enjoyed my 14 years in the club, and those fond memories will stay with me forever. It was a stellar experience. On a lighter note, we did get a note from Sandy, our member, on behalf of the Hickory Public Schools, thanking us for our donations of $3,000 to the Bookmobile project to retrofit for their library on wheels. So we appreciate and we're happy for that opportunity, Sandy. Thanks for sending that letter. If you have not taken the survey, please do go online and do that. We obviously had a meeting last week for those that were here and talked about the survey in our week 4, which is kind of service, teacher of the year, student guest, things along those lines. So if you have not taken that online, please do that or fill out a hard copy and get that to us so we can get those taken care of and find out the results and move forward for the next year, for our 2016-2017 Rotary year. I also have a not naughty and nice, but just a naughty list of past due. So if you are on this list, I'm not calling anybody out right now, but please take care of that. We do need to make sure that we have our rolls complete by the end of June. Anybody on the rolls come July 1st, we have to pay Rotary International for that. And just as a reminder, almost all of the dues that you pay goes to Rotary International. We do not keep that money here locally. So if you're on the rolls and then don't pay, the club actually has to fork over that money and we aren't able to recoup it from Rotary International. Cliff Moon is doing well. Linda informed me, so he had triple, for those that don't know, he had triple bypass surgery a couple weeks ago. Cliff Goddard, I'm sorry. Yeah, Cliff Moon isn't here today. I want him to give any, his phone's going to blow up after the meeting. Cliff Goddard in Atlanta had triple bypass surgery a couple weeks ago, and he is doing well. Thought everybody would like to know that. Linda, you have a membership meeting after this meeting today? You guys just going to meet right up here? So membership committee members, please meet right up here after the meeting today. And I had mentioned last week, and I totally botched it, I want to make sure I get it right, that Rachel Geck, who is our scholarship winner, her grandfather was a 1956 Hickory High grad and a Paul Harris Fellow in the Kannapolis Club. So I think I screwed all that up last week and wanted to make sure. He was also Hickory High School's first overseas exchange student to Denmark in 1955. And then Hickory High is in desperate need of proctors for testing on June 7th through June 9th. See Linda Lutz if you're interested in volunteering for that. Also, a reminder, on the 23rd of this month, we will not have a lunch meeting. Have our awards meeting right here, same place, but different time. Meet from 5:30 to 7-ish or so, and the cost will be $15 for members, and we'll have sign-up sheets start next week. We encourage you to bring your spouses as well to that event. And then be thinking about the Rotary International Convention is in Atlanta in 2017. So if you want to go to a Rotary International Convention and the travel's been an issue for you, this is not going to get a whole lot closer than that, I don't think. So, maybe put that on your calendar for next June. Be thinking about that. And I also think they're offering some discounts if you sign up early, if anybody's interested.
Only this week. The big discount ends this week.
The discount ends this week. Do you remember offhand what it is, John? I saw something.
$225 or something like that instead of $4 something.
$225 if you sign up this week versus $475. So it is quite a substantial discount if anybody's interested. Dan Kirby just passed me a note. We have one extra large t-shirt left for a Rotary t-shirt. So if you're interested, it's $10. See Dan Kirby, he'll get you fitted up. Drew Van Horn has our Sunshine Committee report today.
See the applause we get. Thank you for that warm round of applause. Birthdays. This has been fun. If you're here, please stand. Beth Meadlock. Is Beth here? Birthday was on May 29th. Drew Van Horn, is he here? His birthday was May 30th. Lindsay Lawhorn, is Lindsay here? We celebrate the birthdays, May 30th. Okay. Shuford Abernathy. Shuford? All right, Shuford's birthday is tomorrow, but today is his daughter's birthday. Is that correct? So happy birthday to both of you. And then Mary Texler, June the 4th. Is Mary? Yes. Let's give these folks a round of applause. Thomas, new grandfather for the second time back there. Raise your hand. The granddaughter was born yesterday. 9 pounds in Denver, Colorado. Is that correct? Congratulations. Are there any other anniversaries? I'm stepping in for someone and didn't have a chance. Any anniversaries this week for any of our members? Go ahead.
Wallace Johnson's son, Will, got married on Sunday. That's right. California.
Yes, congratulations, Ron. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any anniversaries or other good news for us to think about? I want to share with you one thing that's a little bit serious and then one thing that's hopefully going to be funny. I think for us as Rotarians, it's important to realize that the 4-way test we say at the end, we get into a robotic mode sometimes. I don't know if you ever catch that with yourself as we end our meeting. But this is a story of a young Rotarian who was asked to join a prestigious Tuesday night dinner Rotary club in his town. And he had all of the prestigious people as members, large business owners, attorneys, doctors, everything of that nature. And then there was a downturn in the economy, and one of the owners of the factory was a member of the Rotary. And he had to lay off a bunch of workers, and he cut the salaries of other workers. Some of the members were worried and asked him, are you worried about protests occurring at your mill and things of that nature? And the Rotarian replied, oh, I'm not worried about that. Everyone knows that this is just business. As the meeting adjourned and they said the 4-way test, they exited the hotel where they held their meeting, and to their surprise, they were met by 4 protesters. The first sign read, Mr. X, was it the truth? The second sign said, Mr. X, was it fair to all concerned? The third said, did you build goodwill and better friendships? And the last one read, Mr. X, was it beneficial to all concerned? And it's a wake-up call for us sometimes to realize it's not just words we say, but they have meaning. So if we say that at the end of our meeting today, let's think about that. Now for something a little more fun. Bob left work one Friday evening, but it was payday, so instead of going home, he stayed out the entire weekend, partying with his friends and spending his entire wages. When he finally appeared at home on Sunday night, he was confronted by his angry wife and was for 2 hours yelled at, and the tirade befitting such an action. Finally, his wife stopped and just looked at him and said, how would you like it if you didn't see me for 2 or 3 days? He replied, that would be fine with me. Monday went by and he didn't see his wife. Tuesday and Wednesday came and went, and the same results. But on Thursday, the swelling went down just enough where he could see her out of the left corner of his eye.
Andrea has our program today.
Thank you, President Mark. So I wanted to stand before you today and say how happy I am to be able to introduce to you the Secretary of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, Susan Klutz, and she is here accompanied with the Assistant Secretary, Carrie Cox, who's working on the PowerPoint in just a moment. But she has such an amazing service to local government and to the state that I hope you will take a moment and just glance at the front of your program. I would like to just start with her mayoral duties, and I'm going to just take this time to cover quickly what she has done as mayor of Salisbury from 1997 until 2011, which was the longest serving mayoral term in Salisbury. So she worked with as the chairman of the Rowan County Parks and Recreation Commission. She was also the president of the Rowan United Arts Council and the president of the Rowan Memorial Hospital Auxiliary, as well as board member of Waterworks Visual Arts Center. So I knew that this was the right Rotary Club for her to come and speak to, because we have such a strong arts presence and local government presence. I personally am very thankful for her work on historic preservation, and so I'll go ahead back to what she's recognized for most right now. So was appointed in 2012 by Governor McCrory as the Secretary of the Department of Cultural Resources, which then became Cultural and Natural and Cultural Resources. And as Secretary, she recently led a successful statewide effort to restore the state historic preservation tax credits. A lot of those tax credits were used in our mill buildings. So if you can think about Collar, Moretz, Lyerly, Piedmont Wagon, and a number of others, they all benefited from that particular program, so it was very important to our redevelopment. So prior to her appointment, she has been serving as a mayor of Salisbury for 14 years, where she was involved in historic preservation, arts initiatives, tourism, gang prevention, and improving race relations. She's married to former district court judge William Klutz and has 2 children and 2 grandchildren. And in 2007, she was named a Paul Harris Fellow by the Salisbury Rotary Club. So we want to welcome Secretary Klutz.
Thank you so much, and I will have to point out that I think I'm the proudest of being named a Paul Harris Fellow, because I know how important the Rotary Club is to communities. I know how important it is to Salisbury, and so it was one of the greatest honors I ever had. I'm thrilled to be back here in Hickory. I've been here several times since my appointment in 2012. Dr. Huffman was nice enough, I think about the time of inauguration time, to invite me to come to the Pottery Festival, which was absolutely incredible. I can't wait to get back to another one. And the North Carolina Arts Council met here in Hickory just a couple of years ago. And after our meeting today, I'm headed to the Art Museum, which I have not visited yet, to tour there, so I'm so much looking forward to that. Thank you, Lisa, for that. And I'd like to thank Andrea so much for her invitation to let me speak to you today. I want to share with you basically a little bit about my department, but mostly about the story of the journey that I had in helping to bring back historic preservation tax credits. Because I think when you hear the whole year-long story about this, you'll be pretty amazed at what it takes sometimes and how people in local communities can make a huge difference in state government. But my journey actually began, and I've got a PowerPoint here to accompany my words, but my journey actually began right here in Hickory in January of 2015 with Mayor Rudy Wright, with Monty Matthews from Hickory Landmark Society, and Richard Swartzel from Cornerstone United, because I was here to cut the ribbon on Cornerstone, which had been, of course, the historic Piedmont Wagon Company. And I'm really very grateful to the enthusiastic welcome I had here and the excitement over this historic building being renovated, and it gave me a lot of good ideas for what I was about to undertake at that time. The historic tax credits had just expired at the end of 2014. I actually was sort of horrified. I know Ann Williams is here, and she actually was the director of Historic Salisbury Foundation back before she was here in Hickory. And so coming from Salisbury, which has used the historic credits, and realizing how important they were, I really was horrified that this legislature had let them expire and had no intention of bringing them back. But Governor McCrory, who had appointed me, was very concerned about this. He understood as well that we had seen $1.67 billion of private investment since the state credits had come in. They had been used in 90 of 100 counties, and it was something really critical to continue the economic recovery of the state of North Carolina and our cities and towns. At the governor's directive, I began a tour of cities and towns, and with Carrie, who is the Assistant Secretary for Marketing and Public Information Scheduling, we actually made 73 stops in 52 different cities and towns before this was all over. And after we were here in Hickory, we began this tour where we would go in and ask the mayor to point out what was the success stories in their cities and towns and what was the potential. Did you still have potential in your city or town? And I didn't find one in the 52 cities and towns that didn't have plenty of potential. So I began calling this an awareness tour. And the reason was I realized people in cities and towns really didn't know what historic preservation tax credits were, and they really weren't too interested in hearing about them. And so we really needed to make people in cities and towns aware of what they had lost and what we needed to bring back. I gained tremendous respect for the vision that people had when I toured this potential, especially these huge mills with trees growing up in the middle of them, and how in the world somebody would be willing to risk his or her own money for it. The governor joined me in 10 of these stops to explain that downtowns were important to him and the Commerce Secretary in recruiting businesses and jobs into our towns. The media also was an important partner, because I realized that when I went to speak for an hour or tour and speak, that I was singing to the choir, that really everybody in the state needed to learn about this, and so TV and radio became very important in this. Also, newspapers were important. Carrie lined up meetings for me with editorial boards, and we were able to explain exactly what we were doing and why. And I didn't realize until the very first one, which was in Burlington. We were on our way to Greensboro. We stopped in Burlington. The editor of the paper there had agreed to meet with me. And I didn't know until he wrote the editorial really how little people knew about it. And but the story he wrote started off with how he really didn't want to meet with me, that it sounded so incredibly boring that he had to drink an extra cup of coffee before he could even go in the room where I was to face me. And so it gave me some insight into how exactly we needed to approach this, that people really didn't understand it like Ann and I and Mayor Wright and the governor did. But we ended up with, in 1 year, over 1,800 media stories about this from our travels. So what I realized too is that there weren't any legislators that didn't think they were a good thing. It was all a philosophy of tax reform, and that in pure tax reform, that the theory that you should do away with all tax credits, no matter what they were. And so that's what really we had run into. We were up against a philosophy and a commitment to do away with all tax credits. And I heard some pretty incredible comments as I had tried to lobby about this before I started the tour in January with you all. And I heard comments from legislators when I went to visit them like, there will be no tax credits. If you're here for any kind of tax credit, just line up out there, out in the hall with all those people that are seated out there. They're all here for some kind of tax credit, and none of them will come back. One legislator, who was a leader, even said to me, "You're wasting your time. No matter what you do with this, it doesn't matter. We will kill it in the end. That's a promise. So you might as well just not waste your time." And I had to say to this person, well, I hope you understand that this is my job and I'm not going to quit. Well, at the governor's directive, we put together a coalition of groups that were interested in this. We called together, and this was right about the time I was here in Hickory a year and a half ago. We called together anyone who was interested in helping with this, and we found that we had a huge amount of different groups, state groups, the Metropolitan Mayors Coalition, the League of Municipalities, the County Commission Association, Preservation North Carolina, and then we had professional groups as well. State groups of architects, bankers, contractors, local chambers, downtown developers, economic developers, city planners, realtors, the list went on and on. We all met together regularly and formed a coalition to encourage people in all the different communities to become involved. We worked with the Department of Commerce for 6 months and put together a plan that would cost the state less, that we thought maybe the legislators would buy into. It had lower percentages, caps on large projects, very drastically reduced residential. But residential needed to stay in there. And that was probably one of our biggest challenges, was how do you convince this conservative legislature that residential is important? And the way we did it was we tried to explain that in historic downtowns in North Carolina, the oldest residential grows up right around the downtown. And so the houses that are the hardest and most expensive to bring back, that you won't keep boarded up, need help. And so it's very important to keep residential in there. Our second challenge was okay, well, if it's so important to Hickory, just let Hickory do this. Why should the state be investing in Hickory? In the Holler, the Lyerly, the Whisnut Mills, and Piedmont Wagon Company? Why can't Hickory just do it? And actually, we had two answers to that. First of all, any historic renovation is costly to a city. They contribute in different ways, streetscapes, parking, sidewalks, and so they already make a contribution. But secondly, it's about something that I did not hear in Raleigh the whole time that I have been there. Historic preservation tax credits have all been all about numbers and taxes and tax reform. That's what you hear. It's all translated into numbers. What you don't hear, and what I learned on this nearly year-long visit, is these buildings that we have, like you have here in Hickory, tell the North Carolina story. And if you only have them renovated in cities or towns that can afford it, you're not going to tell the entire story, and you're going to leave parts of the story out. And these buildings just can't sit vacant forever. But let me tell you a little bit about what the North Carolina story is from my perspective. It's hosiery mills like Holler, Lyerly, Whisnut here in Hickory. But it's also textiles in Burlington and Greensboro, furniture in Mebane, tobacco in Durham and Wilson. But one of the most important things that I told as I went around the state about the North Carolina story was about your own wagon company, and how, along with how impressed I was with the wagon company when I was here, and people who came up to me and said, you know, my father or my grandfather worked here years ago, and this is important to me personally. But what I found here, and also in Sanford at the buggy factory in Sanford, were how this told the North Carolina story of what happened before the invention of the diesel engine and of the automobile, and how Hickory was known nationally for the wagons that were produced here, and how the automobile changed that part of our history. But its building is a part of our history that we can't lose. I also saw a peanut mill in Edenton, hardware department stores in Greenville, hotels in Statesville and Concord, hospital in Gastonia, post office in Clinton, homes. The story just goes on, but it tells a beautiful story of the state. And I learned that North Carolinians value, we have a rich history here, and North Carolinians value that history, and they don't want it lost. So that was so incredibly important to let the legislature hear about this. Representative Ross, who was a former mayor of Burlington, put our program into legislation, and I'm happy to say that it passed in the House. It had 67 co-sponsors, including Representative Mitchell Setzer and Representative Jay Adams, who signed on as sponsors, and it passed overwhelmingly 98-15 in March, just 2 months after I was here. So this was wonderful. This was a victory for us. The House had a press conference, and Speaker Moore was kind enough to invite me to join the legislators in the press conference to say that this is what North Carolina needed, and the Senate needed to follow. Well, my journey was actually an emotional roller coaster, is how I will have to describe it, because immediately after that came this wonderful headline that one of the leading senators had said that the tax credits were actually not just dead, they were graveyard dead, and that they had gone into a committee in the Senate, which never met, and they wouldn't be heard, and so they were gone, and we might as well just forget about them, and that was in March. So what that meant was 6 more months of tours for me, because I thought at any week this was going to be heard in the Senate, and we knew that we had enough votes in the Senate if we could just get it there, that it could pass, if we could just get it out of the committee. We never got it out of the committee. Well, by August, the governor had a rally in Raleigh, and Mayor Wright came with some supporters there, with people from all over the state, to make one final trip to the legislators to say, you've got to do this, this needs to be done. So I'm thrilled to say that the tax credits did survive at the very last minute in negotiations, complete with residential, just as we wrote them, and we're very thrilled over this. The governor actually proclaimed October 14th as Historic Preservation Day, and I have about a 3-minute clip as a message to you from the governor, if we can get it to work, and if it doesn't,
I was
here we go.
honored to be
Got it.
sworn in as the 74th governor of North Carolina. January 5th, 2013, I did it overlooking Main Street of our state capitol. And the major thing I said is we're not only going to protect Main Street, we're going to rebuild Main Streets throughout North Carolina. Because the Main Streets are the living rooms of North Carolina. They're the family rooms of North Carolina. They're the showcase of North Carolina. They're the history and culture of North Carolina. This is an historic day in North Carolina because what we proved was a grassroots effort can make a difference in the state capitals, the state capital of North Carolina, to change bad legislation and make it even better, to preserve our history, to preserve our culture, and to continue economic development and create jobs. And this was a grassroots effort, not inside the belt line of our state capital, not inside the legislature, even the executive branch. This is a grassroots effort that came from outside, from small towns and large cities alike, from the coastal communities to the east, to the Piedmont, to the mountains. And that's what I'm most proud of. This was Republicans, Democrats, independents, engineers, architects, real estate agents, small shop owners, mayors, county commissioners, school board chairmen, the grassroots of North Carolina. That's what did it. This is a recruitment tool for me and the Commerce Secretary. Because when the Commerce Secretary and I sell North Carolina, guess what's the first place they want to go see when we bring their families? The executives who are making the decisions, their families want to see Main Street. And if Main Street's full of blighted buildings and decay, it's going to raise a red flag that the whole area is full of decay and blight. It doesn't have a future. And that's unacceptable. So this is going to help revive the main streets of North Carolina. This proves that North Carolina government can work if we hear from the people. Let's keep moving forward and save these historic buildings and create jobs and travel tourism opportunities. That's what this is all about. God bless each one of you, and I'm proud to serve this.
So in closing, I want to say, first of all, thank you to you, thank you to the City of Hickory and all who have promoted this and encouraged the legislators to do this. And I just want to very briefly tell you a little bit about what happened to my department since this bill was signed in September. Because you may think, well, you must be really bored with nothing to do since the tax credits were successful and we don't have to worry about that for 4 or 5 more years. And I do want to say, please do consider using these tax credits while we have them. They are incredibly helpful. But I also want to tell you a little bit about what happened to my department. That was, the governor had recommended that because we had such a strong team in cultural resources, that we should also include natural resources along with it into my department. So it moved from Diener, which was the former Department of Environment and Natural Resources, to our department, which is now called the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and their department is now called the Department of Environmental Quality. So they can focus on that, and we focus on what they used to call their attractions. We refer to them as the state treasures, what the state owns that we consider treasures, just like our cultural resources. So with that, our former department, which was Arts, History, and Libraries, will now includes nature. That includes now the North Carolina Zoo, the North Carolina Museums of Natural Science, both in Raleigh and Whiteville, 3 aquariums, including Jeanette's Pier in Manio, 35 state parks and all the lakes and natural areas that go with that. And the legislature was so enthusiastic about our taking that they gave us even more than the governor recommended, which was land and water stewardship, which is actually the Clean Water Management Trust Fund and the Natural Heritage Program. So wherever you go in North Carolina, you are near our department in some way. Also, I want to say thank you to everyone that voted for the bond referendum, because that affects our department along with universities and community colleges and the military and agriculture, which benefit. For our department, $75 million went to, or will come to our state parks, along with $25 million, which comes to the North Carolina Zoo. So we've got some very exciting things going on right now in our planning stage, and looking forward to the wonderful things that will happen in the future with that bond money. But again, thank you so much for having me here. I'm thrilled to be back in Hickory. It's a wonderful place, and looking forward to my tour today. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can, if you have any. Or if not, just thank you again for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on getting it passed. And I guess no good deed goes unpunished, right? You just get more and more work, right? So we'd like to present you with this book of just thank you quotes for coming in and educating us a little bit today about everything that's going on.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Stephen, come on down. What do we got today?
We're getting $56 for a total of $1,173. There are 35 cards and 2 jokers.
All right. Don't forget the little blue buckets in front of you as well.
Oh, okay. I get to
You get to make a new friend today.
All right. Let's see how I can do. 3481894.
894, the last 3. I think I don't know. We trust you. 4-way test, girl. There you go. You got it. Just pick you one right out of there. There is a lot left still. 9 of diamonds. Free lunch.
Always hope.
Thank you. Please stand and join me in closing with the 4-way test. Of the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth?
Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?